Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I've kept this story inside for years, but the weight of it is too heavy to bear any longer. This memory has haunted me, and I feel I owe it to Lucy, my young neighbor, who left us far too soon. I remember enough of that night to know the truth, and I believe someone should finally share her story. It was a warm summer evening, and I was sitting by my window sipping my tea and watching the stars emerge one by one. My neighbor Lucy, who was only 18, was outside laughing with her best friend, Emily. They were inseparable, as close as sisters. But that night, their laughter sounded different, almost strained. As the hours passed, I prepared to go to bed when I heard raised voices coming from Lucy's house. I glanced out my window, catching a glimpse of them through her living room window. The lights were dim, and both of them looked tense. I saw Emily lifting her hands in what seemed like an attempt to calm Lucy down, but soon their conversation grew more heated. The tension between them felt almost like a storm about to burst. I couldn't make out the words, but I could sense Lucy's frustration, her fists clenched. Then something shifted. In a flash, Emily picked up an object from the coffee table, a heavy crystal piece perhaps. She seemed to pause for a moment, her hands unsteady. In a brief, unthinking moment, she swung her arm, likely not realizing the impact it could have. The moment that followed was almost frozen in time. Lucy staggered backward, her face filled with shock. Her knees weakened, and she gently crumpled to the floor. Emily's hands flew to her mouth, her face stricken with horror at the scene in front of her. Lucy. She didn't move. For a few moments, there was complete silence. It was as if time had frozen, and neither of them could believe what had just happened. I remember clutching the edge of my windowsill, unable to look away. I wanted to shout, to run over there and help, but I felt paralyzed, my body locked in place by the horror unfolding before me. Then Emily's parents showed up. They must have heard the commotion, or maybe Emily called them, I'm not sure. But they acted fast, moving with a calmness that terrified me even more. I watched as they cleaned up the scene, wiping away every trace of what had happened. They wrapped Lucy's body in a blanket, and I could see them whispering to Emily, calming her down as they hid the evidence. They took her body away, out of sight, and out of everyone's mind. I sat there, staring into the darkness long after they left, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Lucy's life had been snuffed out in an instant, her light extinguished by a friend who'd lost control in a moment of anger. I wanted to believe it was an accident. Maybe Emily didn't mean to go that far, but it didn't matter. Lucy was gone, and no one was going to pay for it. I kept this secret for years, too afraid to speak up, too ashamed that I hadn't done something sooner. But now I can't live with the guilt any longer. Lucy deserves justice, and maybe, by finally telling the truth, I can help her rest in peace. So, this is for Lucy. This is the story of how she was taken from us, in a moment of anger, and how the truth was hidden. But the truth always has a way of coming out, and maybe, just maybe, this will finally bring her the peace she deserves.
Hello, my name is Olivia, and I'm here to tell a story I never thought I'd share. My husband and I had been together for years, and until recently, I believed he was a good, honest man. But I've learned that sometimes, the person you think you know best can surprise you in ways you'd never imagine. It all started with his father. My husband had always had a complicated relationship with him. There was tension between them, often subtle, but you could feel it. His father was a man of means, known for his success, and my husband sometimes felt as if he was constantly trying to prove himself. Yet, despite their issues, I never would have thought it would lead to anything serious. One evening, my husband came home looking unusually tense, like he'd been carrying a heavy burden. He was restless, distracted, and wouldn't say what was bothering him. At first, I assumed it was just stress from work, but it didn't take long for me to notice this was something much more troubling. He started having these nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, and became increasingly withdrawn. It was as if he was hiding from his own thoughts, afraid of something I couldn't understand. As time passed, little things didn't add up. He'd leave the house at odd hours, make cryptic phone calls, and become defensive if I asked questions. Then one day, I overheard a conversation he was having with a friend. The things he said made my stomach turn. He spoke about his father's estate, the family money, and how, with his father gone, he'd be free from the shadow that always loomed over him. It felt wrong. My heart started racing, but I tried to convince myself I was misinterpreting things. But then, I found the letter. It was hidden among his things, a note from a lawyer discussing his father's assets, clearly dated just days before his father's passing. The pieces fell into place in my mind, each one like a weight pressing down on my chest. I confronted him, hoping he'd deny it, hoping I was wrong. But he just looked at me with this haunted expression, and in that moment, I knew. I felt a mix of betrayal, horror, and grief. How could he go through with something so unimaginable? It was clear that he was unraveling under the weight of his own actions. He would pace around the house, mumbling to himself, unable to sleep, unable to find peace. He'd made a choice, and that choice was consuming him. I couldn't live with it, couldn't keep his secret. So I did what I knew was right. I went to the police, heartbroken but resolute. The look on his face when they arrived was one I'll never forget. Part of me wanted to console him, to remind him of the person I thought he was, but I knew that person didn't exist, not anymore. Now I'm left trying to make sense of it all, wondering if there were signs I missed, things I should have seen. Every day I grapple with the memory of the man I thought I knew and the truth I was forced to confront. I did what I had to do, for his father, for myself, and for my own conscience. And though it's painful, I believe doing the right thing is the only way to find peace in such darkness.
Hello, my name is Mr. Wilson. I've been teaching geography here at Northridge University for many years, and in that time, I've come across countless bright students. But there's one who I remember vividly, Michelle. She was talented, kind, and had a spark that set her apart from the rest. Her story, though, is one I've kept close to my heart for too long. It's time I finally share it. Michelle was an art major, and she had a gift. Her work was often displayed in campus galleries, and she was always eager to learn, full of potential. I remember when she first met Dr. Harris, a respected professor in the art department. He was known for his charm, intelligence, and influence. They grew close, and soon they were more than just teacher and student. At first, it seemed like a happy relationship. I'd see them at campus events together, smiling and laughing. But as the months passed, Michelle's demeanor changed. She missed classes, seemed preoccupied, and her usual lively spirit faded. I'd occasionally catch a glimpse of her walking through the halls, looking anxious, lost in her thoughts. One evening, I saw her leaving Dr. Harris's office with a strained expression, as though something was weighing heavily on her. I wanted to ask if she was all right, but she quickly disappeared down the hallway before I had the chance. Then one day, Michelle stopped coming to class altogether. News soon reached the campus that she was gone, and it hit all of us hard. She had so much ahead of her, and her sudden absence felt like a wound on our close-knit university community. The truth began to unravel during the following investigation. It turned out Dr. Harris had exerted a degree of control over Michelle that went far beyond their initial relationship. He'd manipulated her, used his authority and influence in ways that were deeply inappropriate. By the time anyone found out, it was too late. Dr. Harris faced consequences for his actions, but Michelle's loss was something no amount of justice could ever make up for. Even now, when I walk past the gallery and see Michelle's paintings, I feel a deep ache, a reminder of her talent and the life she should have had. I've carried her story with me all these years, thinking maybe I should have stepped in, trusted my instincts. But sometimes, we think it's not our place to interfere, especially in such personal matters. By sharing Michelle's story today, I hope to honor her memory and remind us all to stay vigilant, to trust what we see and feel, even when it's difficult. Michelle's art will always be a part of our campus, a piece of her left behind. And through her story, maybe we can learn to protect others who might be silently struggling.